You're listening to Agile Ideas, the podcast, hosted by Fatima Abuchi. For anyone listening out there not having a good day, please know there is help out there. Hey guys, welcome. So we decided to do this really ad hoc conversation talking all things Agile in the PMO and also just sharing some of our insights around what's happening in the trenches to coincide with International PMO Day, the first of its kind. International PMO Day, for those who do not know, was part of the brainchild from Joe, who is our partner in the PMO leader community, who initially had the concept and then decided to reach out to a number of other PMO thought leaders around the world and paired up and agreed May 9th as International PMO Day, the first of its kind for our industry. So before we kick off into the conversation around agility in the PMO, being on this call, I've got obviously Lucy, Dave, and then Nina. So maybe just what does PMO mean to you guys, being people in this industry for a long time? Lucy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, PMO and my role in particular and how it resonates to me is the thing that guides me is around how I demonstrate for an organisation transparency and confidence over their delivery. So I guess whatever I do and whatever particular aspect of PMO, obviously there is many, my focus is always to bring transparency and confidence over the delivery. And I really focus on mitigating risk and optimising outcomes. So I guess that's my kind of like guidance for whatever I'm doing in PMO.
Amazing. Thank you, Lucy. Dave, what's your thoughts on PMO?
Yeah, sure. Some great points there, I think, given by Lucy. I'll probably take a different aspect and look at it from a project manager's perspective and say, well, what does a PMO mean for me from a project manager and someone that delivers a lot of projects? Is I think what I want from a PMO is to be there to support me and to help guide me through the processes that may be in place, to help me escalate any of issues that I have, any dependencies, any risks. Also to help me with forecasting my budgets out, and also I suppose leaning on the PMO to help me with resourcing and training, and uplifting my own capability to be a better project manager.
A really good summary and a good perspective from a delivery land, which is something that a lot of PMOs can often forget. So great insights. Thanks, guys. One of the things I wanted to quickly touch on before we talk about some misconceptions is we've been doing a lot of work in this space over the last 7 or so years. And obviously we're learning a lot about what's going on in different client sites and the specifics of the working in the trenches. One of the things that, we always talk to our clients about is a common misconception that people think that Agile in the PMO and bringing agility to PMO is about changing everything that we're doing, the what. But what they don't realize, it's actually not the what, because I'm sure we can all agree that governance is governance, regardless of what type of project or program or company or maturity. But so the what, it always remains constant, whether you're resourcing or pipeline or dependencies, etc. But what changes, which is I think where we've spent a lot of time, is helping clients to focus on the how they are doing things. And it's what I like to call putting the Agile into governance and not putting the governance into Agile. What's your thoughts on that?
Do you want to go first this time, Dave?
Sure. I think it's absolutely right, sort of making sure that we put in Agile into governance. So making sure that, in PM, I suppose in years gone past, PMOs have been viewed as very regimented, very static, very inflexible in their approach to managing projects and portfolios and programs to boot. And I think by having that sort of agility to being able to flex with the organization, to be able to flex with the different types of projects, using I suppose there's always an often used term of using the carrot rather than the stick. So being able to give PMOs that flexibility, giving the project managers what's in it for them to be able to deliver successfully, and it may be a range of different types of tools to support the project managers for the different types of projects. Not every one project's the same, and we know that one methodology is not the same, and for me, getting looking at black and white of like waterfall and agile, for me it's using a combination of the both to make sure that I can deliver my project to as quickly as I can do, and with all those guardrails around that, so time, cost, so yeah, I think having a more agile way of working and thinking into delivering projects is paramount, and what better place to look for that than from the PMO?
100%. Yeah, definitely. Did you want to add anything, Lucy, to that?
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Dave. I think the other area that I quite like to come at with Agile in the PMO is how we embrace all the kind of the really great parts of Agile around the mindset. So just because we work in PMO and it's considered to be a fairly structured and disciplined environment within the organization, I think it's great that we also employ the Agile mindset, in that there's nothing wrong with challenging anything that we do. I'm sure we've all produced the PowerPoint packs, 200 pages long, with 80 of those being in an appendix. There is absolutely nothing stopping us challenging that. And also just having that curiosity around the information that we're providing, that kind of like, so what challenge to that. So we provide this information, but what kind of behavior does that actually encourage, and is it the right kind of behavior? And how are the processes that we employ and the data that we share and the way that we conduct ourselves, how does that contribute to kind of positive change and momentum within delivery within an organization? So just a slightly different perspective, and something that I try and challenge myself to do. And
again, Lucy, it goes back to the how of doing things as opposed to just what.
Indeed.
We've just had John join us. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining.
Hey, John.
Hi, John.
John and I have met.
Hi, I'm in a very noisy office.
No problem.
It's all right.
We all decided to do this ad hoc conversation about some of the insights we're seeing, but also about what Agile in the PMO. And we were just saying that a lot of the time we understand that people are misunderstanding that Agile in the PMO is not about the what, the governance, it's the same regardless of where you go, but it's the how. And it's the how we change our ways of working and how we provide that support for delivery teams that's going to better further their goals and objectives. I know you're in a noisy office, but if you wanted to share anything from your perspective, John, that you're seeing around that, feel free to. Love to get your thoughts as well.
If there's any noise in the background, I do apologize. Very much so. It's about the how, it's about the flow, and how we do. I find more and more that transformations is the space I'm in. We focus on the old adage of rubbish in, rubbish out, and we need to move up that layer where the Agile or even the ePMO gets involved at the CX level, looking at the actual value streams going through a company. I've come out of a year's situation with a large global assurance company where their project delivery value stream had so much leakage they didn't realize it, yet the teams were just grinding away at the bottom doing work, never, and the money never hit the bottom line, the P&L, because at the end of the day they were scared to charge the clients.
It's a really interesting point, John, that you make. It's something similar that we've seen in the energy space where they, adopted the value stream concept, but the challenge became, how does the PMO change to adapt to that way of working? So again, comes back to the how, and so it's a really valuable perspective to consider that the PMO itself needs to start elevating, and the way that I think it's doing that more is by aligning itself to that agile transformation, because that's taking over in a lot of organizations now. So it's a really good place to be from a PMO perspective as well. So yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. I'd be keen to sort of move into some of the challenges that we're seeing in the market. Obviously not mentioning any companies at all, but just thinking about what are some of the common challenges that we're seeing at the moment in organizations. And I'll start with one. Now, we know Agile is not a methodology, but there are a lot of Agile-based methodologies, so I'll just clear that one up. But organizations that we're seeing in the work we do is seemingly trying to find a way to put a Agile-based methodology and overlay that onto a PMO. And we know PMO is not about delivery, they don't deliver projects, but rather they are supporting delivery. And so I think that sometimes there isn't a standard way of working, going back to the how. And so there's confusion then in how delivery teams are running and how the PMO can do its governance. So that's one of the things that we're kind of seeing. And one of the ways to address that is by aligning everyone and having them speak the same language. So getting that up front, determined up front, means that we're going to drive greater outcomes because we're aligning governance and delivery, which is the way it always should be. So that was probably one of mine. Does anyone else want to share maybe one of theirs? Lucy, do you want to share one of yours? Or
Yeah, sure. Oh, go on, John.
Sorry, Lucy.
It's all right.
You go first.
Oh, I was just thinking in a recent role of mine, something that I found a challenge is where you don't necessarily have a cohesive, so enterprise level PMO driver. So something that I think is a challenge for the PMO is that often when you are trying to transform and improve and optimize the way that you work, so that you can really support delivery, mitigate risk, optimize outcomes, you're often trying to do that almost like by stealth on the back of a project. So I think that a big challenge for me in roles where you're heavily invested in delivery and projects is how you transform when in reality it's not funded, and then how you kind of maintain that adherence to like a broader enterprise governance structure whilst employing kind of more transformative mindsets and tools and techniques, and kind of line that up within a whole machine that can often be the bigger organization. So I think that can often be a challenge for PMOs when you kind of know what you want to do and you know the direction that you'd really like to take things in, but how do you do that without kind of creating friction in a larger organization? I don't have the answers to that, by the way, but just something that I think is a challenge.
We'll figure it out together, no doubt. Thanks for sharing. John, do you wanted to add some thoughts?
Yeah, coming bottom up,
yeah.
I'm getting increasing work in doing agile transformational audits.
Okay.
Which covers your point, Lucy. And I'm doing one on a second one on a big program of work where they're using agile. And again, it's the fifth coming of the same project, would you believe? They've moved away from waterfall, 4 attempts failed. One was 500 million, this one's about 20 million. And they're trying
Not
to
much then. Yeah.
they're trying to use pieces of Agile to improve what didn't work in waterfall.
Yeah.
They realize, and there is in both cases a third-party supplier who's modified their waterfall framework to look pseudo-agile as well. Salesforce and Pega come to mind. Right? And they realize there might be something missing. So for one reason or another, they've reached out to me, and in both cases, starting loosely with the Bible, I asked them where their playbook is. And they said, oh, we do say, no. What tailored version are you running now that I can compare you to as an audit? Oh, well, we don't have one and we don't keep it up to date. Right? So
which is really common, right? Really common.
That's why I got the work, Lucy.
Yeah. Back to being on the same language that we mentioned at the beginning. So getting everyone on the same language.
Yeah, and the AMO should have that common Bible. It might be variants to a certain degree depending on context.
Yeah.
Like you can still do waterfall-based projects in an agile environment.
Absolutely.
I did that at MBN quite successfully.
Yes.
Coming back to this work, what amazes me is the first thing they don't talk about is mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we know the cone of Agile, it's mindset, principles, values, and frameworks, but we skip over mindset very, very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that takes a long time as well. And people don't realize how much time it takes to change the mindsets.
So that's where I start the audit from.
Yeah, absolutely.
and psychological safety and empathy, all, if they're not there, you're not going to get that sort of self-leading ability of a scrum squad or multiple squads without fear of being whacked around the head by a waterfall PMO in a nice way. I meant that nicely, sorry.
And ties nicely to something that we see as well in our team, like around the challenge that organizations are having where they've got a vendor. Often many of the vendors are using like a really heavy agile based methodology, whether it's Scrum or other. And then the organization itself has not yet gotten up to that point. And so then they have this conflicting challenge of how are they going to align not only their statements of work and the vendor engagement overall, but the delivery. And so then we hear a lot of complaints about that. So that's probably another challenge area. Dave, do you have the couple of challenge areas that come to mind for you that you've seen in the trenches?
Yeah, for sure. I think one that we repeatedly see is from companies that are in growth mode or actually in startup mode, where in all intents and purposes, a lot of their project teams are accidental project managers and project teams. And then you scratch below the surface and they find that there is nothing there for the project managers to work with. And that's where I think so the PMO can help and support is rather than focusing on, I suppose, the who, it's focusing on the what and the how, right? And the who will come later on. But making sure that the PMO has got some basic processes in place that, irrespective if you're a project manager full-time or whether you're an accidental project manager that's working 2 hours a week on projects, you've got a consistent way of working through your projects. And for me, that's the biggest bang for buck for any company that's in growth or in as a startup, where they can get some semblance of doing things in a regimented way, or I should say in a systematic way rather than regimented. So yeah, but also keeping a mind in that agile, but the mindset, like you were just saying there, John, right? It's about the mindset. So yeah.
And it starts at the top as well. It's a management layer that's pushing down all of these ways of working that they want and they expect and they need. But a lot of the time they don't themselves go through that journey because they don't have time, they're too busy. So it's definitely one of the ones we see as well. And
also you're impinging on people's careers here who got them through waterfall and hierarchical management. And now you're looking at a flatter structure and self-leading people that don't need managers.
Yeah.
So I'm being very basic here, and it's a challenge
Absolutely.
in government-led organisations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Couldn't agree more on that, for sure.
And the other thing, David, I found in one of the two clients I had recently where I did that, I have to involve the unions every time they wanted to change a screen because it could impinge on the end user.
Yeah, far out.
So, it's very difficult for a Scrum.
Quite a hierarchical and complex organisation, right?
Yeah. It's not that easy. So it brings me very neatly to the whole concept of theory of constraints.
Definitely, 100%. And this goes to sort of one of the other things that we talk a lot about is what really makes the sort of adaptability come to front of mind is a lot of the work that we seem to be doing is on helping organizations to align three key things. It's the identification and alignment of strategy and the translation of that into delivery, and then the delivery handover into operations, and then the operations realizing back into the benefits. Now, traditional PMOs spend all their time playing in the delivery space, but seldom spend time aligning with operations or taking that translation to strategy. They're either sort of doing one or the other. So what I'm keen to sort of spend a few minutes on is how do we make PMOs more adaptable? What are some of the things that we're seeing that is very different to the way we would traditionally do it? And how are we seeing that play out in client organizations that's really driving some of that mindset change, but also that behavioral change that's driving better outcomes for clients. So some of the adaptive ways of changing the way we work, particularly when it comes to PMOs that are trying to be more agile. Anyone want to kick us off with some thoughts on what they're seeing or doing?
I'm happy to kick off a bit of this conversation.
Sure.
What I found is that you're right, in delivery type product delivery or project delivery environments, we have the classic conversations we've had already. What I find to a large degree that PMOs don't consider the operational metrics.
Yeah.
So I've been very, very happy to be involved in rolling out Agile and Lean in operational environments, right? And I mean technology. So Tech Ops at Bendigo Bank, levels 1, 2, and 3, patching and DBMS levels. So kind of the stages behind the desks as well. And it's quite an interesting transition as we're trying to move the work from an issue-based scenario in ITIL, as the phones were answered or things came in. Definition of ready and definition of done were very critical there. Into, well, we've got these 100 issues. Can we do some root cause analysis and make it a product upgrade to stop those issues occurring again? So I actually got some of the squads. I had about 10 squads there in Bendigo Bank, actually using both an ITIL-based board and a JIRA-based board at that time to do that work. But the PMO weren't interested at that stage, to be fair, in the operational metrics that we were doing. They were more interested in the product delivery squads that are already off and running a year earlier. So getting them involved and saying, well, the more we could do this, we're actually going to reduce tech debt, on an ongoing basis. We're going to come up with ideas to improve the product from that DevOps environment. So we're at the op end of DevOps, if you see what I'm getting at.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I think there's some challenges though. It's a lot of the challenges around that is also at the fact that the people are at different paths in the journey. So some of them some people time to come in and have so much more exposure and experience, and so they might, again, going back to language, be speaking about certain things. But the people that are in the organization, if you think about it, the people in operations a lot of the time don't understand project management fundamentals. Waterfall, Agile, doesn't matter. And then now we're bringing in, not just do you have to understand project management, which they've struggled with for a really long time, but now we're adding this confusing thing called Agile, which is becoming really overwhelming for them. So that's another thing that we need to, bear in mind as well, I think. I think one of the ones that we've seen work with some of the larger clients is the alignment of your traditional scheduling and utilizing JIRA. and being adaptable to be able to provide a portfolio view, which is born and bred out of your traditional program or project schedules for large programs, but then also bringing in the necessary metrics and data that you would traditionally track in Jira in the form of boards and things like that. So there's some really cool work that one of our team has been doing in some of the banks, for example, around aligning your portfolio program in with Jira as well. So that's probably one of the ones that I would like to probably call out. Lucy, Dave, do you guys have one or two examples you want to share about how adaptive comes to mind?
Yeah, I think just an area that I'm really interested in at the moment is more, so it's more like the end of the project, and that kind of readiness piece, and I guess it kind of loops back to what I was saying at the beginning, that I'm really interested in how PMOs can support, and there is definitely a requirement to be adaptive in how that's done, but support that kind of risk mitigation and optimizing the outcomes when it gets to the kind of like the end of delivery. And so I've seen a lot of really good work around actually understanding capability, so understanding the broader businesses, not just their kind of willingness to accept change, but their actual fundamental capability, and really kind of like thinking about that in terms of project selection, and not just picking the things that are kind of really exciting to do, but what are those things that the business can actually accept, and if they can't accept, how is that capability built into the project plan and kind of costed into the project plan? And yeah, I find that area quite interesting and kind of quite new, I think, from a PMO perspective, how you kind of you go beyond the constraints of the project and think about what the business is actually capable of accepting, and then also what the potential solution is to increase that capability.
Yeah, that's a really good delivery teams need to do that. Obviously, a lot of the time they do that throughout the life cycle of their projects. But you're right, PMOs don't typically get involved in that. And so sometimes there's that sort of gap, which is why it's so important to make sure that the handover component from delivery into operations is not just the responsibility of a project manager, but actually the PMOs have that governance lens.
Yeah, but I guess it's adaptive because it's extending what's once been a boundary. Yeah, for the project team and for PMO. So yeah, I think I'm kind of quite interested in watching how that plays out. I think it could potentially be a bit of a growth area.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, did you have any some of the ones that you've seen recently that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I think from me, and just listening to what John and Lucy were saying, there is some real good insights into what they're seeing, and trying to, I suppose, tie all of that together in something that I'm seeing is, you know, trying to try delivery, ops, and strategy, tie all that together. But I think in my particular thing that I'm seeing is, I suppose, coming back to what John was saying was about mindset. And to be truly adaptive, you've got to have a mindset, a clear and open mindset. And from a PMO perspective, is having the ability where you've got a flexible leader as the PMO head, but is willing to engage with the organization, to listen to the stakeholders, and start adapting the PMO to what the stakeholders want, not what delivery wants. Right. So the stakeholders come from strategy, they come from operations, they come from delivery, they come from finance, right? They come from procurement, they come from all over the organization. And it's basically having a PMO that is set up to fulfill the requirements of the whole of business around how it delivers projects, but always having a touch point back into the customer on the customer, so the organization, on a frequent basis, so they're always adapting the outputs of the delivery to suit the changing needs of the business. And we're in a world now where change is lightning quick. You know, anything that is put in place today will change tomorrow, and so having a PMO that can be nimble and change and be adaptive to those lightning fast changes that are requested by the organization is paramount to making sure that the PMO is continuously adding value to the organization.
100%. That's a really well articulated point. And I particularly like your comment around a lot of the time, and I think all of us have probably been PMO managers or leaders at some point in our life. And I know, like many of us, sometimes there's been times where it's been about us as the leader of the PMO. And I know that even in my early days, it was all about how I wanted to run things, but realizing over time that it's actually not about the who. It needs to be based on, and this goes back to what I talked about at the beginning, it's around the capabilities. And so, you know, in AMO, we talk about capabilities and capability in a box. And that's about starting with the capabilities that you need, not necessarily what the person who's at the helm of the PMO thinks we need. And so we need to make sure we bring all of those perspectives across the enterprise, which ties into all three of your input points that you've just made in that comment. John, did you want to share something that you've seen?
Yeah, I did. We're saying what the stakeholder needs, what leadership and management. A couple of the times I find they don't know what they do need.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And one of the roles of the PMO, but the EPMO, APMO, whatever, is when to say no.
Yes.
Keep the flow working neatly. If you keep saying yes, it's going to be all things to all people and nothing gets delivered that's of value.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like the scope document. I have the classic and saying, well, that's great as a scope document. Can we have an out of scope document as well? Because I think people try and weave things in between lines in a scope document that are actually out of scope. So having the two sides, having the flip side of the coin is very important. And this is where the APMO play that very nice policing effect as well. So they're not guide rails, Fatima, they're guard rails. That makes some sense, but they're adaptable. So over time, like a retrospective, you keep going back to them as well.
Yeah.
So you agree them across the whole organization, like the playbook.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And taking some of the principles, the things that work, and not expecting to take everything and putting everything in place. That's.
And the other thing I wanted to mention for Lucy's benefit is the best transformations or agile project type changes I've found is where change management is at the beginning.
Yeah, for sure.
Through the whole squad development. So they know what instructions to update, what roles need changing before it gets delivered.
Yeah.
So when the software or the product's delivered, change management then have to adapt to all the other stuff around it, like change of roles, union negotiations. You know, where do you want to start? If you don't do that, it's not going to fly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. But I think it's terrible, John, sometimes that it continues to be an afterthought. And I think that some of that is, you know, like a mindset shift. There's some kind of, I don't know, like historically, some parts of PMO that are considered to be more important than others. And I think that change is one of those ones in a more traditional structure that's a bit like, oh, that'll take care of itself. But I completely agree if you're transforming, why would you not involve that kind of you know, that kind of just education and mindset and an approach and way of working? Why would you not bring that in at the beginning?
And have comms at the center of that, continuous comms of what's going to happen when it gets delivered or when pieces get delivered.
Yeah.
I would argue that that's also a skill set that maybe PMOs don't typically have. I mean, you'll be lucky if you come from a background that's worked in projects and you've understood the delivery environment. But then if you don't, you probably need to pick up that. And that's probably one of the essential skills is that change and
good point.
I'll definitely add to that as well. No, that sounds great. I think just sort of rounding out the conversation today, we've obviously got other opportunities to introduce incremental change through the concept of micro projects. Like there is micro learning. We talk a lot at AMO about micro projects being, 1 week sprints that PMOs can do regardless of the agile-based methodology organizations using. Transparency through the use of Kanban walls or other types of tools and techniques as well would be another one. And then one of the other ones that is one that constantly gets customers unstuck is how to understand and align on dependencies, because dependency management is not done in the same way in an agile-based environment as it's done traditionally. So they're probably just to round out some of those opportunities to think about as well for the people to consider. So just sort of moving to kind of the last point I wanted us to kind of cover off today was, when we think about all of the challenges we've talked about, there's probably some key themes that are the reason why these challenges are happening. And I think we've talked about one or two of them. So mindset we've talked about, and the other one is not having the same language, whether it's in the form of a playbook or other. Some of the other top sort of reasons for, or sort of some of the top most common things that we have as in common. So we definitely see that change doesn't stick being one of them. And then obviously we talked about mindset as well. So maybe just going around the room, is there, one key one that stands out for you as to what would be a key theme for these challenges? Luce, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, it's I guess because it's my area of passion and something that I'm really kind of invested in researching at the moment. But I think like behaviour and culture are my themes and my watch points, because I really don't get how you can succeed if those foundational elements are not in place and invested in and challenged where they're negative.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good one. I think it's probably one of our top 5, I think, from memory in our recent ebook as well. Dave, did you want to share, what do you think is a key theme that's in common?
Whilst I know I was saying earlier about the who is the sort of the last step in the piece. I think I'll just focusing on that is around that skills and competence, making sure you've got the right people doing the right things let alone at the right time. Mm-hmm. And often we, without opening the can of worms here, but often we see the requirements for people to manage PMOs as being the same as how you would deliver a project, right? So the competencies are different and the skills are different to managing a PMO, to managing a project. And but we time and time again see that in job adverts for PMO leads, director of PMOs, whatever, you must have a PMP certification or sort of Prince 2 or whatever that may be, but it very rarely actually helps them when they're trying to deliver and manage a PMO.
Yeah, well said. Definitely agree with that one.
Yeah, can I pick up on what David? I totally agree, David. And if you look at people as a flow of work themselves, it all starts with onboarding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what I found, and done it at 2 clients now, we had to go back to the original onboarding of people into the agile environment and use the PMO to help with that. And one of the key things we did there was, because we could stop them at the gate, sort of thing, so we wanted to make sure they had the mindsets. We could teach them the technical skills of Python or testing or whatever. In fact, we set up a little university around that I might come to later. But it was really making sure they had those mindset skills, that self-leadership. And the other thing we found useful was to actually set them tests that they could bring into the interview process. So if you were a coach, how would you coach this? Or if you were doing a transformation and you had this problem, can you do a PowerPoint presentation and present back to the interviewing committee? Because that showed both how you presented, what you presented, and how you go about it. And we could do that at different levels. So you're doing a mini trial already. And the second layer of that was to actually then get the people that might be working around them to actually do the second level interviews.
That's actually not only is that a great idea to do, but also you're putting them under pressure, which goes back to Dave, your point earlier around being in that environment. If you can't think on your feet in that sort of instance, which I know will be challenging for a lot of people, it may mean that you'll struggle in a high pressure environment that is agile as well. So yeah, I love that one. John, we do we've got the option to do something similar we offer we can offer to some HR teams where, you know, to Dave, to your point, you've got project managers that have a PMP or don't have a PMP. There's all these different things that we don't know how well they are at delivering and how well they are at managing projects. So we've got a project management board game that we actually leverage to, that's a practical game of skill that we've used in our team that, you know, it may come to the final interview, and maybe the final interview is actually a number of these candidates playing the game to demonstrate how they work, how they interact, how they communicate. That's like first-hand experience, and I think will go a long way. So I love that. I think it's a great one.
It's very important. And then how they would work with more than one person. We find some PMs just want to be people on their own.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. Rather than leaders.
Dave, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, just playing on the game scenario that you were talking about there, and coming back to what John was saying about the onboarding is, you know, in other organisations I've seen work really well is where they're looking for project managers to come in, is you invite the project manager in to do an interview, and then you flip the interview on its head and you start asking them about any particular project that they've managed, and then start asking them specific questions around that project. And, you know, how did you deliver? What did you deliver? What was the scope? You know, was there any change requests? What were the risks? What were the issues? What was how did you go about communicating with your stakeholders? That kind of thing. And then equally as well, that work well is then, you know, start introducing another project into the conversation, so they're constantly having to think about which project they're talking about and what scenario fitted what project. So just as a different way of that onboarding, making sure that the people coming on board have got the right skills and competencies and the right behaviour to the culture of the organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on, Dave. I agree. And the last one, I think, to round out that I think we can probably collectively agree that we are seeing is a fragmented approach. So you've got parts of the organisation that are going down one path that says they're doing Agile this way, another team doing this way, and there's such a fragmented approach to trying to do the same thing, but just in different ways. And I think sometimes, going back to dependencies, we need to better align what it effectively is, the inputs and outputs, and what we're trying to achieve. And all of that should, again, align to our overall objectives and key results that we're trying to achieve as an organisation. So I think that organisations can do better from linking the bottom up as well as the top down to drive that, I guess, that change that they need to do as well. So we're getting near the end of time today. I just wanted to go around the room and just get, I guess, one myth that we can dispel about Agile and the PMO. And I'll start with one that is a very common one. The myth that I constantly remind people is a myth is that you have something called an Agile PMO. What I mean by that is there's a lot of really shitty PMOs that have gone and put the Agile term in front of their PMO and think that they're going to be better. I believe truly that every PMO should be Agile in terms of agility, which is why I don't think there is such a thing as Agile PMO, but there is Agile in the PMO and agility in PMOs. So I think that's probably one that I wanted to call out. Who wants to go next, sharing a myth about this space?
I think a myth for me is that tools are going to fix your processes and your people.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
Enough said with that one. That's all.
Yeah.
Dave, did you have one that you wanted to call out?
I think you stole my thunder with about the Agile and the difference between Agile and agility. But yeah, I'll tell you what, come back to me. Let's go to John and I'll think of another.
Okay.
I think for me is that we don't do it for them, we do it with them.
Yes.
They think that the PMO is there to make sure everything happens, but actually we've got to do it with them, like HR, and we come alongside the leaders to deliver. Yeah. And we're more that, you know, that knowledge base and so on. We might have people aligned to us like project managers or product managers.
Yes.
But really they should be in the business or in technology, not in the PMO.
Yes, 100%. It's that collaboration that is absolutely the essential. And when to add to the collaboration, while we give Dave another moment to think of his myth, we have the collaboration, we have the communication, which goes back to the change and comms. And then for me, the big one is the consistency.
Yeah.
So it goes back to that fragmentation of approach. You can get around that by having consistency in the way that you work, which ties back to the concept of the playbook as well.
Yeah.
Dave?
I think a common myth that I probably see and hear about is the PMO's the handbrake, right? The PMO prevents us from doing work. And I think we need to dispel that, coming right back to what we were talking about right at the start. And unfortunately, before John came on, is that the PMO is there to support and guide, help, as John was just saying there, do it with them, right? That comes back to the adaptive PMO also, right? Is so you still hear it often enough that the PMO prevents us from doing this, and it needs to be done this because the PMO is stuck in its ways of yesteryear of it. Well, it must be done this way or my way, which in effect comes back to an egotistical perspective as well.
Yeah, 100%. Love that one. Well, that brings us to the end of our conversation today. Thank you, Lucy, Dave, and John for joining us, especially at last minute. We just thought it would resonate with the audience around International PMO Day, particularly this being a topic that, comes up quite a lot. So just to close out, thank you all for your time. We will share how to get in contact, and continuing to be part of, obviously, this meetup group, John, that you're a member of, and then further conversations that we'll be having as well. But yeah, I think the spontaneity of this event and all making time to be there just demonstrates how agile we are in the way that we work. Yeah, thank you all for your time.
Very good. Thanks,
you,
Fatima.
Lucy.
Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please share this with someone or rate it if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and to stay up to date with all things Agile Ideas, go to our website www.agilemanagementoffice.com. I hope you've been able to learn, feel, or be inspired today. Until next time, what's your Agile idea?